Welcome to Tune My Heart. Yes, that's Toon as in cartoon, because in this podcast we'll be taking a closer look at popular animated movies through a Christian lens, in search of faith-relevant themes and traces of eternal truth. I'm your host, Tracy Herold, and just a disclaimer, I'm not a Bible scholar, nor am I a film scholar. I'm just an animation fan who loves Jesus, and who wants to explore how the themes and ideas presented in some of my favorite films might resonate with the Christian faith and help remind us of what we believe, in sometimes surprising ways. So I hope you'll join me as we get animated about our faith. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tune My Heart. In case you didn't know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So I thought, what better way to wrap up this month than with an episode all about Disney Pixar's Inside Out 2. And returning to discuss it with me will be Pastor Jay Nepomuceno of the Climb Mental Health Ministry, who you may remember from my Inside Out 1 episode last year. But before we get into my conversation with him, let's learn a little bit about the history behind Inside Out 2. There was a time when it seemed like Pixar was on top of the animation world, and every other studio was just trying to keep up. But by the time Inside Out 2 came out in 2024, Pixar had been through a rough few years. Onward was released in theaters in March 2020, which was pretty much the worst time for a movie to come out, as most theaters shut down shortly afterward due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The studio's next 3 movies, Soul, Luca, and Turning Red, were released straight to Disney Plus in the US, without even being given a chance to run in theaters. Lightyear was released in theaters in 2022, but it failed to find much of an audience, and deservedly so, in my opinion. Sorry, there is no way that is the movie that Andy from Toy Story was watching. Elemental in 2023 started off slow at the box office, but did gain momentum thanks to positive word of mouth, ultimately earning $484.8 million worldwide. Not bad, but still a far cry from the big numbers the studio had gotten used to pulling in prior to 2020. So Pixar needed a win, and boy did they get it. Inside Out 2 premiered in June 2024 and won over both critics and audiences, surpassing all box office projections. It outgrossed its predecessor just 16 days after its release, and crossed the $1 billion mark in just 19 days, becoming the first Disney animated film to gross over $1 billion since Frozen 2 in 2019. Inside Out 2 ultimately grossed almost $1.7 billion worldwide, and became the highest-grossing animated film of all time. Although that was a short-lived distinction, as it was overtaken by another sequel out of China this time, Ne Zha 2, earlier this year. But it was still the highest-grossing film for all of 2024, a great win for Pixar and for the animation industry as a whole. And it currently sits as the 9th highest-grossing film of all time. Just how did Inside Out 2 end up being such a huge success? Well, being a sequel to one of Pixar's most beloved and best-reviewed former films certainly helped, I'm sure. Although being a sequel can be a double-edged sword, as you have to live up to the legacy of the first movie or risk upsetting its fans. Inside Out 2 seems to have succeeded, though, in taking the world already so beautifully built in the first movie and building upon, evolving, and expanding it. And I think that the world was also more than ready for another animated film addressing the subject of mental and emotional health. After all, Pixar isn't the only one who's had a rough last few years. Behind the scenes of this success story were producer Mark Nielsen and director Kelsey Mann, taking over from the first film's director Pete Docter, who served as an executive producer on this one. This was Mann's feature film directorial debut, believe it or not, and he also worked on the story with Meg LaFauve, who you might remember was one of the screenwriters for the first film. The screenplay was ultimately written by LaFauve along with Dave Holstein. As they had done for the original film, the Pixar team consulted with clinical psychologists, including Dr. Keltner, who had consulted on the first movie, as well as Lisa D'Amour, who specializes in the development of teenagers. Also serving as consultants this time around were a group of 9 real-life teenagers, dubbed Riley's Crew, who provided feedback to help make Riley's story and character as authentic as possible. Amy Poehler and Phyllis Smith returned as the voices of joy and sadness, and I don't think there's any way this film could have been done without them. Lewis Black also returned as Anger, but due to pay disputes, Bill Hader and Mindy Kaling chose not to reprise their roles as Fear and Disgust, which is a shame, but Tony Hale and Liza Lapira did a decent job of stepping into their shoes. Maya Hawke joined the cast as Anxiety, the leader of the other new emotions, and she was instantly as iconic in the role as Poehler and Smith are in theirs. Now, I think it's important to mention, too, that while I always talk about the big names at the top of these movies, the directors, producers, screenwriters, and actors, there are hundreds of people below them, animators, storyboard artists, and others, doing the day-to-day work to bring these stories to life. And sadly, some of those people, 14% of Pixar's full workforce, in fact, were laid off just a month before Inside Out 2 arrived in theaters, and never got to receive their well-deserved bonuses for contributing to the film's eventual success. Some of those laid-off workers also spoke to IGN about concerns over the studio's current culture and frustration over how hard they had to work to get the movie finished on time. Which kind of puts a damper on the rosy comeback story I've been painting around Inside Out 2, doesn't it? But in a way, that seems fitting, because part of the message of Inside Out 2 is learning to accept both the good and the bad, instead of only putting a positive spin on things and refusing to see any faults or contradictions. So I'm glad that Pixar got a huge victory with Inside Out 2, but I'm also sad for the many people who helped to make that happen under some reportedly rough working conditions and then lost their jobs instead of getting to enjoy that victory. I hope Pixar continues to produce beautiful animated films that make us think and feel deeply. But I also hope the culture of the studio behind the scenes improves for everyone involved. In the meantime, despite knowing a bit about how rocky the road was that brought it to us, I cannot help but love and appreciate the final product that we got in Inside Out 2. And given its success and all the creative possibilities that the Inside Out world offers, it seems almost inevitable that there will be more to come in the future. Before we hear from today's special guest, let's check in with Darcy, age 9, for our Kid's Eye View synopsis of the film. Hello, Darcy.
Hi.
Darcy, today we're talking about Inside Out 2. What did you think of Inside Out 2?
It was fun.
Did you like it as much as Inside Out 1, or is the first one better?
Inside Out 2 is better.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, so can you tell us what happens in Inside Out 2?
Riley grows up and there's going to be new emotions, so the new emotions arrive and they put the old emotions in the jar and they meet like a video game character and a cartoon character and a deep dark secret thing. And they escape from the jail place and they try to rescue Riley because the other emotions are hurting her and they save her.
They save her.
The end.
How do they save Riley? Do they bring back her old sense of self, or do they create a new one?
Create a new one.
Mm-hmm. And what is the new one like? Is it all good or all bad, or is it both?
Both.
And is that okay?
Yeah.
Do you remember what some of the new emotions were?
Anxiety and shyness, something. Shy, something.
Embarrassment?
Embarrassment.
Uh-huh. Who was your favorite character?
Embarrassment.
Embarrassment, yeah. He's funny. What do you think is the message of Inside Out 2?
When you grow up, things change. and we're not perfect, but it's okay.
Who is perfect?
God?
Yep. And does he love us even though we're not perfect?
Yeah.
He does. All right. Thank you, Darcy.
You're welcome.
Joining me today, he was the very first guest to appear on Tune My Heart, and now he's the first guest to join me for a second time. It's Pastor Jay Nepomuceno of The Climb. So, welcome, Pastor Jay.
Hi, Tracy. Good to be back.
So, as a quick refresher, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your ministry?
Yeah, I am the care pastor at Liberty Baptist Church in Newport Beach, and I love what we do here. We're been here just over 4 years, and I also have an itinerant speaking ministry, traveling the country, speaking in churches about the issue of mental health. And I work with people. I love working with people here at the church and around the country, and I just try to help people with a biblical perspective and some real empathy.
Great. And is it a certified mental health coach?
I am. I'm a certified mental health coach, and I just earned a certification in biblical counseling as well. So I have those two certifications. Well, I actually have a third certification in childhood trauma, healing adverse childhood experiences. So yeah, just finished the biblical counseling certification.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So last time we talked about Inside Out, of course. And so naturally this time we are talking about Inside Out 2,
Yeah.
the sequel. So first up, I usually start off by discussing if there are any elements in the film that Christians might object to for any reason, just to kind of get those possible negative points out of the way. So can you think of anything that might be problematic?
Nothing stands out right now. I think there are some elements that would be incomplete, and I think we'll dig into those things.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely nothing damaging or of huge concerns. But I think from a biblical perspective, or from a Christian perspective, we can just kind of complete the picture,
Yeah.
which is a beautiful overall picture, but no red flags for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. The movie does deal with puberty,
Mhm.
but that shouldn't be something that that we're afraid of, right?
Right, absolutely.
That's a natural thing that all of us go through.
Yeah,
That's part of God's design.
yeah. And then as parents, that's something we have to consider.
Yeah, something that we have to have to deal with for sure. When the movie first came out, I had a mom come to me and say that she had some problems with it because she didn't like the way that Riley behaved and she thought it was a bad example. And I thought, we understand when we're reading the Bible that it's often descriptive, not prescriptive.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of things that happen in the Bible that it's not God saying you should emulate this,
Exactly. Hmm.
but just telling this is what happened.
Yeah,
And so it's kind of the same thing with movies. When we see a character behaving badly, which we see Riley behaving badly,
sure.
the movie isn't saying you should behave like Riley.
No, absolutely not. No, it's not. It's not excusing it, but it's explaining it,
Yeah.
which is good, which is important. Yeah.
That's a great phrase, not excusing, but explaining. And that's kind of what this movie is showing is how anxiety can make us behave in ways that maybe aren't characteristic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's dealt with. She pays the price for it.
Yes.
So I think it's dealt with in a really good way. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so second, I like to always come up with a theme Bible verse that fits the film. Is it Psalm 32:3 that you mentioned sometimes? The when I kept silence, my bones waxed old through my roaring all the day long.
It is. Yeah.
I thought of that one because I feel like that describes anxiety and the effect that it can have on us.
Yeah. That's very good because the picture of the roaring all the day long and just all the noise that's going inside with all the characters, especially anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a great one.
I think the Psalms in general are great for talking about our emotions, all sorts of different emotions. So another one that I came up with was Psalm 94:19. And we're going to use KJV in this episode just to let the audience know because that's the version that we both use in our personal lives and church lives. So Psalm 94:19 in the KJV, it says, "In the multitude of my thoughts within me, thy comforts delight my soul." So again, that multitude of my thoughts within me. And even though we're using that one version, I always like to look at the verses in various versions just to compare and contrast how they're interpreting it,
Mhm.
because obviously the Bible wasn't written in English,
Right.
whether it was King James English or any other.
Yeah.
So the NIV, I really liked how it put it because it says, "When anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought me joy." So I just thought that was neat that we get two of the character names in that Bible verse.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So we'll just say that those are the two Bible verses that we're going to say are the theme for this episode.
Love it.
But obviously, we'll probably be bringing up other Bible verses in our discussion of the film as we go along. So, when I first asked you to be on the podcast last year, you hadn't even seen Inside Out before. Is that right?
That's correct. Mhm.
And then you ended up becoming such a fan of that first movie that I think you saw this one in theaters, right?
Yes, that was a must.
I'm pretty proud of myself that I introduced you to the world of Inside Out.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
Which one do you like better, or do you have a preference between the two?
That was tough. I think I would lean Inside Out too because it's more, in essence, relatable to me.
Mhm.
Both are beautiful, both are powerful. And I feel like most people would say the original one is better. I can definitely see that, but I just see much more that's personally relatable. And I think that just kind of makes sense as she's becoming an adult and struggling with these emotions. So for me, actually, the sequel here hit me harder,
Mhm.
and a lot of the concepts are just a lot more relevant to my life and ministry, really. So I like the sequel even more than the original, personally.
Yeah. I like what you say there, that it hit you harder.
Mhm.
You know, I struggle with anxiety, and it definitely hits hard.
Yeah.
And in some ways that I don't know, it was intense the first time I saw it.
Yeah. Yeah. There were some moments for sure.
Yeah, but definitely both great movies.
Mhm.
I probably lean a little bit towards the first one. I just kinda like the simplicity of it.
Sure. Yeah.
But, I mean, there's a reason that Inside Out 2 was, for a little while at least, it was the highest grossing animated film of all time.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah.
But it obviously hit a chord with a lot of people, and I think
Yeah.
that makes sense because we live in a very anxious world.
Yep. Hmm.
So, the first film was all about sadness and Joy learning to accept the need for sadness and the value of sadness. This time around, we're introduced to 4 new emotions. Well, 5 new emotions because we also have nostalgia.
Yeah. That was cool.
But the 4 main ones: anxiety, envy, ennui, and embarrassment. And the real focus becomes anxiety. And as I said, I have experience with that. I know you have experience with anxiety. But really, everyone on earth has experienced anxiety at some point and to some extent, right?
Sure. Yeah.
You said something recently along the lines of experiencing anxiety doesn't make you a bad Christian, it just makes you a normal human.
Right. Absolutely.
But before we ever meet anxiety and the other new emotions, we start the film off with the original 5 emotions from the first movie: joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. And we see that they're all kind of working together in harmony. They're helping Riley play this championship hockey game. Everything seems perfect. It's especially nice when we see moments of joy showing appreciation for sadness and encouraging her to do her work when it's needed, showing that she did learn from her adventures in the first film. And Joy tells us all about Riley, and it's all positive. Riley is exceptional. She's kind, she's smart, and she's a teenager now. We see the personality islands from the previous movie, but we're also told that now her memories are also creating new beliefs and a belief system. So some of those beliefs are like, I'm a really good friend, my parents are proud of me, I'm a winner, things like that. And then all of those beliefs come together to form her sense of self, which is characterized by the phrase, I'm a good person.
Hmm. Yeah.
And Joy says her sense of self is what helps Riley make good choices. So, with what you know about how our brains work, is that a pretty good picture of it? That, our memories and experiences create beliefs, and then those beliefs create kind of a sense of self?
Yeah, I thought I was just so amazed by it. It was funny when we went to see it in the theaters. Went my wife, our JJ, our oldest son, and a couple friends, and they were all interested in it. But I'm sure I was so annoying because I was just so impressed, and I kept looking to my wife and other people. Do you see that? Do you see the pictures? This is exactly it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say this is exactly it, but it's such a good picture, a good explanation of how our, in essence, thought processes are formed by our experiences, good and bad, and getting too locked into the bad. And we don't see that here yet, but there wasn't any carryover from the first one because she did have a tough time there.
Mhm.
But they do dig into that, how she made friends and all that, and just how this all forms her sense of self and memories. And then you see Joy trying to take control again and trying to throw stuff to the back of the brain or whatever.
Mhm.
She's just trying to manipulate things still. So she's learned some lessons,
Yeah.
right, about sadness, but she's still trying to manipulate things based upon all just positive, joyful stuff.
Right.
And we're not a complete person if that's all we're learning from. So yeah, I just thought it was great.
Yeah. As soon as I heard that I'm a good person,
Hmm.
kind of a little alarm bell goes off in my head saying,
Sure.
Jesus said there's no one good but God, right?
Right. Yeah.
And not that we want to say I'm a terrible person.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of need to find that balance. I mean, we want to encourage, especially our kids, to have
Hmm.
positive self-image.
Yeah, God worth is how I put it.
Mm.
I'm not so afraid of the concept of self-esteem,
Hmm.
but I know it can be taken to an extreme that's unhealthy.
Right.
But if we have that self-worth in the sense as believers of God worth, our value to God, we are valued by God, and find our place in this world based upon that valuing from God. He loves me, He values me so much that He gave His Son for me. I mean, that's extreme valuation, right?
Yeah.
And so, yes, there's certainly a balance. And it did. It got my attention as well. And I kind of followed that, wondering where they would go with that. And I know we'll get there. But yeah, I'm a good person. I'm not afraid of that. I understand where it's coming from
Hmm.
and where it can be put in the right place as believers. But yeah, I was certainly interested in where they were going to go with that.
Yeah. I like that. God worth. Obviously, this is a secular film. It's not a religious film.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of one of the things that we could say is missing from the picture, at least as a believer.
Hmm.
Some of your beliefs that are forming your sense of self should be God loves me,
Hmm.
Jesus died for me,
Hmm.
I'm created in God's image, things like that.
Yeah. Hmm.
And also I'm a sinner,
Yeah.
saved by grace.
Right. Yeah. It's not bad. It's not wrong. It's just incomplete without the full, without scripture coloring that.
Right. So Joy even calls Riley our masterpiece. And like you said, she's kind of manipulating. I think she says we keep the best and we get rid of the rest or something like that.
Yeah.
Sending those bad memories and those bad thoughts to the back of the mind, which on the surface kind of seems like a good thing. If we have bad memories, we should send them to the back of our mind, right? Or is that
Hmm.
a dangerous thing?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Some things need to be dealt with, and moving on is not the same as being in denial,
Mm.
right? So sometimes we move on, but there's a process for moving on.
Mm-hmm.
So what she's picturing there is the person who's, in essence, suppressing emotions, not dealing with really important things like the grieving process. The Bible's very clear: "Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted," right? And what she's doing is a very Western thing. It was, we'll just throw it to the back of our mind and deal with it later, or hopefully not ever deal with it. Well, you're not truly going to experience the comfort of God unless you deal with it and you address it. You work through the questions and things like that, because like what they're there,
Mm.
still there. You haven't made them disappear. You just thrown it to the back of your mind and they'll pop back up.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's certainly a really, really good, powerful picture of an unhealthy way of dealing with stressful or, situations.
Mm. So we don't want to dwell on the negative, but we do need to deal with it.
Yeah, there's some things that, we can just let go,
Mm.
but there's other things that we need to process properly and ask the right questions.
And learn from.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, as I said, Joy calls Riley our masterpiece. Her parents are calling her an all-star and saying, "Oh, you're going to get a scholarship," really building her up. But does that maybe place a heavy expectation on her?
Yeah.
And that's, like we want to praise our kids,
Mhm.
but can we veer into putting too much pressure on them, I guess?
Yeah, there's a balance there. We do want them to be ambitious. We wanna be realistic, and I know we're considering a fictional story, but yeah, parents do have to consider that. I mean, you more than likely, your kid is not going to make it to the NBA or NHL or even play college sports. It's not likely, but sometimes it does happen, and so we have to be realistic. Let's be affirming, let's be positive, let's be cheerleaders, but let's be realistic and just balance the pressure.
Right. So overnight, the puberty alarm goes off in headquarters. The demolition crew shows up.
Mhm. Yeah,
The console that controls the emotions is suddenly super sensitive.
yeah,
You have raised teenagers and you
yeah.
were a youth pastor for many years.
Mhm.
Is this a pretty good picture of?
I thought that was great. It was so funny, and it was just great. A little bit obviously a little bit too sudden, but
Yeah.
still, the picture is just like it is almost like you have this, you have a cherub that turns into a demon almost overnight. It's just the fact. Like, yeah, you're right. I've raised 4 kids and worked with teenagers, but yeah, everything changes. It was a great picture. It was a great picture of that.
Yeah, especially, where the emotions are just barely touching the console
Yeah,
and just
yeah.
her emotions go wild and they're like, "This thing is broken." And it's like, yeah, that's what it feels like, right?
Yeah, anger, there's a place for it, but, he said, "I barely touched it." And that's really a perfect picture, once again, metaphor for depression, anxiety, when our brains
Mm,
are set to the default setting of emotional reactivity. That's when we struggle with depression and anxiety. So the default isn't rationality, it's emotional reactivity. And so as I was reviewing for this in the last couple of days, I'm like, oh man, that is so powerful. I want to dive into that as far as what kind of similarities there are in the brain with the depressed or anxious brain with the pubescent brain, the brain that's going through puberty,
mhm,
because there are some similarities in the brain that as far as addictions, the same circuits that drive addictive behavior are very similar circuits to depression and anxiety. That's why
mm,
it can be such a challenge to get unlocked from depression and anxiety. It's the same type of neural pathways.
mm,
And when I give my talks on depression and anxiety, I use an illustration to just kind of show how reactive, in essence, you're barely touching that button, but it just goes, right?
mm.
And so that was such a great metaphor, and it's something that I'm going to dig into if there's any neural similarities between the brain that's going through puberty and the brain that's depressed or anxious. Just fascinating.
Yeah. And so then the new emotions show up. We have anxiety, who has a lot of energy and a lot of baggage, which again, kind of a brilliant shorthand picture of anxiety.
Hmm. Yeah, the baggage was great. Yeah.
Envy, who is very tiny but has giant eyes.
Hmm.
So she's looking at what everyone else has.
Yeah.
Embarrassment, who is so large that he can't escape notice, even though he would clearly like to.
Yeah.
And then ennui, or boredom,
Boredom. Yeah.
who just, almost noodly lays on the couch, just stares at her phone.
Probably my favorite character. I'm honestly just because it's so funny, especially
Yes.
for a teenager. It's just so funny. But yeah,
Yes. And I love that she has a French accent to go with her
right.
French name.
Yeah,
Perfect.
just so snooty about everybody else's stuff. Yeah, so teenagery.
Yeah. At one point, anxiety says Riley's life is more complex now, so she needs more sophisticated emotions. I don't know if these are sophisticated emotions, but definitely, I mean, your life does get more complex as you grow older.
Yeah. Mhm.
Joy says, I've learned that every emotion is good for Riley. She's still trying to have a positive attitude about all of these emotions, even though they're
Mhm.
kind of driving her and the others crazy already.
Yeah.
And then anxiety says, to kind of explain what she does, she says, fear protects Riley from the scary stuff she can see.
Mhm.
My job is to protect her from the scary stuff she can't see. I plan for the future.
Perfect. That's so perfect. Fear is a good thing that's built into God designed us with those. And even God designed us with that, in essence, that panic response, the possibility of danger.
Hmm.
And God designed all those circuits to keep us safe. And so it's something to consider, but sometimes those things fire off inappropriately. And that's where we need to discern that, right? And take control of our brains as we can. And it could be more of a challenge for those of us who are more anxious. But yeah, that's the challenge there is like discerning truly rationally. Okay, I can't see it. It's possible, but is it probable, right? These different things that we cognitively figure out of whether or not we should be afraid. But really, just kind of a perfect description.
Yeah. Preparation is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think in Proverbs it even says, if you foresee the evil and hide yourself, that's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But often the future that our anxiety is planning for is not a real future. It's not a real thing.
Hmm.
And then what anxiety calls planning, we see would probably call catastrophizing. She's thinking of all the worst case scenarios
Hmm.
and going to the extremes. And in this case, the worst case scenario that she's trying to prevent is Riley not having any friends in high school because she finds out that her best friends from middle school are not going to go to the same high school as her. So her whole goal becomes she's going to impress the older girls and she's going to get on the hockey team and try to make friends by being cool.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And, making new friends isn't a bad goal in and of itself, but the way that she goes about it is not necessarily, well, it's definitely not a good not a good thing. Like anxiety has a very the ends justify the means point of view at this point.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And then when Riley's sense of self, her I'm a good person, rears up and starts to interfere with those plans that anxiety is trying to make, she removes it and launches it off to the back of the mind.
Yeah.
So, can anxiety cause us to kind of lose our sense of self and act in ways that we wouldn't otherwise act?
Yes, absolutely. And here's an interesting thing. A lot of the talk and breakdowns of the movie have been pretty cool. And there are a lot of people who analyze this who don't want to name anxiety as the villain.
Mm.
She's for sure. Every story has a protagonist, antagonist. Anxiety is the antagonist, no doubt.
Yes, for sure.
But anxiety is the villain. And I know not everybody's comfortable with that, but anxiety is the villain of this story. I'm not saying it's that this character is evil, but anxiety is when anxiety is trying to take control inappropriately, that is the villain. We do have to control it. We do have to manage it.
Mm.
And so for me, I will name anxiety as the villain, at worst or at the most minor sense, it's definitely the antagonist of the story. And so, I mean, if we're talking about villain, well, that's trying to destroy her sense of self is obviously it's an aggressive act. It's the same way as, in essence, Joy is trying to manipulate it. But Joy is obviously not the villain, but she's one of the protagonists that needs to learn properly. I think we'd put her properly in her place. But yeah, anxiety can cause us to act in a way that isn't truly us. So I really thought that was a really good picture of, no, let's get rid of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of extreme was like, oh, I'm a good person. I'm going to throw that out as that picture can be taken as like, oh, you can't be a good person if you're anxious. Well, that's not right.
Mm.
But it does cause you to act in ways that aren't actually you at your core.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's interesting that you bring up the debate over whether anxiety is the villain.
Mm-hmm.
I would lean towards antagonist, but not villain.
Mm-hmm.
Before this movie came out, I was discussing it with a friend, and he was concerned that she was going to be the villain because he felt like that was going to cause kind of a stigma against mental health or,
Yeah.
okay, anxiety is bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a villain is trying to do bad for bad's sake, maybe, or for their own sake.
Well, and just I don't want to hijack the conversation.
No.
I happen to like Marvel, not the new stuff, but yeah, I've enjoyed other phases of it.
Yeah.
Thanos to me is one of the. Are you familiar with the Marvel universe?
Yeah. Right. So Thanos thinks he's doing good.
Yeah, I think he's one of the best villains that have been created in cinema. He's so complex. He really is.
Mm.
And he really does want to do well for the universe, right? So his motivations for himself are good. And just like anxiety really, they're all looking out in their way.
She thinks she's helping Riley.
Yes, they all think they're helping. And it's all coming from a genuine place. Embarrassment, all of them, even envy, fear, anger, all of them are coming from a genuine place. Well, this is what's best for them right now. Well, not necessarily. And so just using that I think it still does need to be acknowledged that anxiety, living in anxiety, is not healthy. It's not.
No.
So there's a balance, as far as being stigmatized. I think
Mm.
if we could acknowledge it as a human condition, that doesn't make you a bad person, but it just takes more effort, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem fair, but it's the truth. It just takes me more effort to deal with stress or to calm down from stress than other people.
Yeah.
We could debate the fairness of it and I could have a bad attitude about it. I could choose that, right? But the truth is anxiety is not a healthy way to live. And so yeah, definitely the antagonist, I totally understand. She did really genuinely want to help and thought she was helping,
Mm-hmm.
but a villain can still have that but still be doing the wrong thing.
Mm.
So that's where I come from it there. Yeah.
That's a great point. So she banishes the sense of self to the back of the mind. She says, "Don't worry, Riley. Everything's going to be okay. Now I'm going to change everything about you."
Mhm.
So, yeah, maybe she is the villain.
Yeah.
And then at anxiety's bidding, embarrassment bottles up the original 5 emotions and they are sent off to a vault to be hidden away with Riley's other deep, dark secrets. And Fear even says, "We're suppressed emotions."
Mhm.
First of all, do you think it's significant that embarrassment, obviously, in the movie it's because of his size, but
Mm.
do you think it's significant that he's the one that bottles up the emotions?
Yeah, another.
That we're often embarrassed of our emotions, right?
Right. It's shame that drives this, right? Stigma, shame. And it's another one of those. I had a number of moments where I just reached out to my wife. Do you see the picture? Like, well, no, duh. It's like, not that she said that, but it's like, well, yeah, bottle it up. Yes, I get it. But it was embarrassment that did it. It's shame. Yeah, that's a driver for us to close off because of shame.
Mm.
And then as believers, we have to remember, and there's nothing healthy about shame. Nothing healthy about shame. Jesus took away our shame, right?
Mm.
When we feel shame, we put it on ourselves or other people have done that to us, and it's not good. And so conquering shame a lot of times is the main pathway to healing
Mm.
for folks to just realize, okay, you know what? I don't have to be ashamed of myself.
Mhm.
This is who I am. This is what God is allowing me to go through, and God is doing something in my life. So yeah, that was a really important picture there.
Yeah. And then so with them banished to the vault, anxiety and the other new emotions start to get to work trying to create a new sense of self for Riley. And it's basically all being formed by anxious memories and anxious beliefs. Like one of the beliefs is, if I'm good at hockey, I'll have friends. So I feel like it's kind of showing that anxiety can create false beliefs in us.
Right.
Not that that's necessarily not true, but it's not necessarily true either that if you're good at hockey, you'll have friends.
Right, right. And it's a matter of identity.
Mm.
So she's identifying as what she does as opposed
Mm.
to truly who she is. And
Oh,
that's a big thing as far as, especially with believers. We identify too much with what we do as opposed to who we are as a child of God.
that's really good. So, guided by anxiety, Riley starts to really strive to be cool and fit in with the older girls. She's afraid to be herself and admit to the things that, like the band that she likes or whatever. She's even unkind to her old friends because she's trying so hard to impress the new ones.
Yeah.
And she kind of forgets all of the joy of playing hockey as she starts trying so hard to impress the coach and the other players. She even breaks into the coach's office at night to sneak a peek at her notes, something that she clearly still knows is wrong, even with her sense of self gone. But anxiety says it's not about who Riley is, which is interesting with what you just said, that we need to be focused more on who we are rather than what we do.
Mm-hmm.
She says it's not about who Riley is, it's about who she needs to be.
Mm.
And then meanwhile, joy and the other 4 emotions break out of the vault, and sadness sneaks back into headquarters. The other 4 head towards the back of the mind to try to rescue Riley's old sense of self. And at one point, Joy explains that her plan is she's going to tell anxiety, "Don't worry so much anymore." And then anxiety will say, "Wow, Joy, I never thought of that before. Thank you."
Yeah.
That moment really made me laugh because that is the type of advice you get from people sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you say you're struggling with anxiety, it's like, "Oh, just don't worry." Or, even throwing Bible verses at you sometimes about not worrying
Yeah.
and like, "Oh, I didn't realize it was that easy." Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That was an important one to put in.
Yeah. So, as they're trying to find their way to the back of the mind, Joy gets frustrated. And at one point, she's almost giving up, and anger tells her, "You've made a lot of mistakes and you'll make a whole lot more in the future. But if you let that stop you, we might as well just give up now."
Mhm.
I thought that was a good little, quick message in the middle of the movie that it was what Joy needed to hear, but it's kind of also what Riley needs to hear. And what all of us need to hear, that, yes, we're all gonna make mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. It was good. I thought it was good that it came from anger
Yeah.
because there is some wisdom in anger.
Mm.
There is.
And then we can't let our mistakes stop us from moving forward. We can't, as he said, we can't just lay down and give up.
Yeah. Absolutely. That was a great, great moment.
And so they make it to, I think it's called Imagination Land.
Mm.
And there they see that anxiety is having the little worker beans. I don't know what they're called.
Mhm.
She's having them all draw and come up with projections of everything that could possibly go wrong the next day.
Yeah.
As Disgust puts it, they're using Riley's imagination against her.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought that was a great description of what anxiety does.
Another powerful metaphor.
Yeah.
And the biblical principle there is casting down imaginations.
Mm,
And so we could let imagination can be a great thing in humanity, right? Imagination drives a lot of advances, but imagination can also drive us nuts.
yeah.
And so the Bible does caution there's some imaginations we just need to cast down.
Mm. Yeah, that's a verse that I quote to myself a lot.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So anxiety is encouraging Riley to catastrophize, basically, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, what is catastrophizing?
Basically, it's going to the worst case scenario.
Yeah, exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah, it's the things that are possible technically, but not probable. It's possible that an asteroid hits us, but it's really not likely.
And then Joy counters this by starting to come up with positive projections and positive pictures and encouraging the workers to rebel and come up with positive forecasts of what could happen.
Yeah.
Is that a picture of how we can combat that negative thinking in ourselves?
Yeah, sometimes the therapeutic process goes like that because especially when we're stuck in depression, we too easily laser in on the negative.
Mm-hmm.
And so something like a gratitude journal is so powerful because it forces you to do some meditating on good things, no matter how little, good things that happen to you. And then, of course, as believers, we take that gratitude journal and thank the Lord for it. It really puts it in a very, very meaningful space that has incredible sticking power. And so, yeah, that was a powerful metaphor of some of the therapeutic tools that are used. And one of them is a gratitude journal.
Yeah, makes me think of Philippians 4:8, one of my favorite verses. Again, one that I quote to myself when I need to get my imagination under control sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest,
Yeah.
whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, lovely,
Yep.
of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. So, again, not that we ignore the negative or try to shove it to the back of the mind,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes we have to redirect ourselves to the positive when we have that bent towards the negative.
Yeah, in particular imaginations. So that's what's key in this scene
Mm,
and in the therapeutic process, where we're not saying we're going to ignore traumatic events. We're never going to ignore reality,
mm-hmm.
but imaginations we cast down.
Right.
And one of the ways we do that is moving into real thoughts of real good things that have happened in our lives.
Mm.
So yeah.
You say thinking about things that have happened. Can we also, if we're having trouble focusing on worst case scenarios, can we also focus on best case scenarios?
Yeah, that's a good thing. That has to be balanced because we could set ourselves up for disappointment just depending on where you are in your in the healing or growing process. It's most healthy typically to focus on not necessarily worst case or best case, but the most likely case,
Mm,
the actual probable as opposed to possible, right? And so that's like, okay, this is what's more than likely going to happen. That's usually what's most healthy for people.
that makes sense. And then we see anxiety conjure up a brainstorm. It's a dark, swirling tornado of all of these light bulb bad ideas. And I thought again that was like a great picture of your mind racing with all of these thoughts and ideas when you're dealing with anxiety.
Yeah. Hmm.
And then finally, Riley's new sense of self is formed that's based on all of these anxious thoughts and memories that anxiety has been putting into her. And instead of I'm a good person, it's I'm not good enough.
Hmm.
I feel that.
Yeah. And that's where it became most powerful. I don't know if I'm going too far ahead of you here,
No, go ahead.
but when anxiety was stuck at the controls and Joy was able to say, you can't control her, whatever is said,
Mm-hmm.
you can't decide what kind of person, whatever is said, it was really good.
Yeah.
And then was able to wrestle control away and then put the sense of self back that says, I'm a good person. And at that point, I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of a bummer. That's kind of a little bit predictable. And I was wondering where you're going. I was hoping that's not where it was going to end. And so I was like, yeah, okay, all right, they're not going to get it 100% right. But then I was so happy that it didn't end there. And they realized, no, this is not the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And then she has this great light bulb moment, wrestles it out of there. Everybody freaks out. Like, hold on, this is the answer, right? It's just, I'm a good person. That's it. And then it's allowed to spring up, I think. Is that what happened on its own?
Yeah.
And then the whole picture of Riley comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm a good friend. Sometimes I'm proud, whatever it was, just all the stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that beautiful picture, this one, I had a few emotional moments, but then when they embraced they embraced it. That was woohoo. That was rough. Emotionally, that was rough. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, wow, they got it. They nailed it in a sense. Now, the verbiage is going to be incomplete as believers,
Mm-hmm.
whereas acknowledging and embracing the truth about ourselves shouldn't ever excuse bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say, I'm a selfish person, as a believer, you need to work on that.
Right.
You need to work on it. That's not good. But you have to, if all you are is I'm a good person, then you don't get better, you don't grow.
Mm.
Right. So you do have to embrace, you have to acknowledge, okay, here is some of the things I got to work on. I tend to be selfish, right? I tend to be angry. Okay. Embrace it in the sense of like, okay, this is what I've been through. Now I'm going to figure out what's driving this anger or this self-centeredness or this anxiousness. And I'm going to work on it. All right. But I'm not a bad person. God loves me, doesn't make me a bad Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I choose not to work on it, well, I'm not a good Christian. I should grow. I should grow in Christ. So embrace what God is doing in my life and then grow from there and work on the selfishness. And so I was so happy to see that come out. It was such a nice twist, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Well, going back just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when Joy and the others reach the back of the mine and there's that huge pile of bad memories that they've sent back there, and Joy says, thank goodness these aren't part of her. But they are part of her.
Yep.
Even if they've been shoved to the back, they're still
there. Mm-hmm.
And then they really become part of her because they have to create the avalanche of those bad memories to get themselves back to headquarters. And then they all flow into that pool that is the belief system. And that's, again, where that new, that final sense of self that you mentioned rises up from, is the combination of those bad memories, those bad experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I say bad, in quotation marks.
Mm-hmm.
Negative maybe is a better word.
Mm-hmm.
But things that we don't necessarily want to dwell on, but that are still true. And then those things all become a part of Riley's sense of self.
Yeah.
And, as you said, we need to acknowledge the truth about our good and our bad, both sides of us, and embrace it, but not embrace it like, well, I'm just going to keep being a bad friend. I'm going to keep being dishonest. I'm going to.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the movie is saying that either.
Sure.
because we see Riley apologize to her friends and we see her explain to them what's going on and why she's been acting the way that she is. And, we see at the end of the movie that she's saying, I know it'll be okay even if I don't make the hockey team. So
Yeah.
she's learning.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But that avalanche of bad memories was definitely like, I don't know, that feeling of overwhelm and that feeling of everything bad from the past crashing into you.
Yeah.
That was intense for me.
Yeah, that was very relatable for me as far as that. I knew what was happening when she came up with the plan. This is how we're going to get back. We're just going to release all this all at one time.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, okay, I know what you're doing. And I was at this point predicting the panic attack. It was growing. It was escalating. You knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Because I think that was very relatable to me for sure. Yeah, that was heavy.
Yeah, and then so they do show Riley after she's accidentally hurt her friend when she was playing too intensely and not caring about anyone but herself and getting put in the penalty box, and then she starts to have this panic attack.
Yeah.
We hear her heartbeat pumping in her ears and her rapid breathing and see her rocking back and forth, having her head in her hands.
Yeah.
Again, if you've experienced a panic attack, that's kind of a very intense moment.
Yeah.
It's nice to see that displayed on the screen, I guess, in a way to, again, destigmatize it kind of and say this is something that people experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And just showing that is really a physiological response. Then you see some of a little bit of a grounding exercise there for touching the rail or whatever that was, just really getting in the moment, just helping your body feel safe, because anxiety is fearing something that you can't see, an imagination, right?
Yeah.
And so just that type of simple grounding exercise, some people will tap or what have you, or stretch. It lets the body know, no, we're safe in this moment.
Yeah.
You're afraid of something that might happen in the future, but you're safe in this very moment. It was great. It was great.
I got excited about that because when she's doing what we would call grounding techniques, because I was like, oh, I know that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great.
She's feeling the grain of the wood.
Yeah.
She's hearing the skates on the ice, focusing on your senses and what's real and what's around you instead of what's going on in your head.
Right. That was great.
Yeah. And breathing, obviously, working on her breathing too. We see her breathing deeply and getting her breathing back under control. So I think I said in my short episode on this, which I did right after seeing it, it's not like instructional. It's not like reading a textbook or whatever, but you could use it to show kids or even adults. Here is an example of how you can help yourself get out of that anxiety moment.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, Joy tells anxiety, you don't get to choose who Riley is as she's pulling her away from the control panel. And then anxiety says, I was just trying to protect her, but you're right. We don't get to choose who Riley is. And so it's both sides. It's we don't want to be the anxious person only, but we also don't want to be the only positive.
Yeah.
Only thinking that we're a good person and not working on anything.
Yeah.
And Joy allows that new sense of self to grow up, and it's got all of these seeming contradictions in it. I'm not good enough. I'm a good person. I'm selfish. I'm kind. I'm a good friend. I'm a terrible friend. And it's that picture of no one is perfect. And if we have black and white thinking about ourselves either way, it's not good.
Right.
The white would be, I'm a good person. The black would be, I'm not good enough. We need to recognize the actuality that we are, we're good, we're bad, we're trying.
Yeah, we have stuff to work on.
Yeah. And then, as you said, they embrace that new sense of self. They let her know that they accept her and they love her as she is, not just the best parts of her. They accept all of her. And really, that's how God loves us, right?
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah.
While we were yet sinners, he died for us.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
He didn't say, well, I only want the good parts of you.
Yeah.
He wants to help us be better.
Yeah.
And obviously cleanse us from our unrighteousness. But he knows we can't do that alone.
Absolutely.
And then Riley's friends come and check on her in spite of how she's been treating them. And I love, this probably wasn't intentional on the filmmaker's part, but I love that one of her friends' names is Grace.
Yeah.
Because that's what they give her, right?
Yeah.
They give her Grace and they ask her, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
And at first she says, yeah. And then she quickly corrects herself and she says, I mean, no. And I thought that was a really important moment
That was awesome.
because we need to be honest
Mm-hmm.
with ourselves, but also with the people close to us and say if we're not okay, right?
Yep, that was awesome.
And then it's also important that she apologizes
Yes.
for the way that she acted. You know, she doesn't say, well, it's okay, I was anxious, so
Yeah,
it was still wrong.
exactly. Yeah, so we see the bad behaviors dealt with.
Right.
So we see an explanation, but it's not being excused.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's so important. And it was great. I thought it was dealt with in a very good way.
Yeah. And then I don't know how to describe this. We see the console kind of calling to Joy with the little sparkles going out from her.
Mm.
But it's something that we haven't seen in either of the two movies before, where previously the emotions were always the one in control. Now I think sadness says, Joy, Riley wants you. So Riley is making a choice to call to Joy and be joyful in this moment. Learning to be the one in control of her emotions rather than letting them control her, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a moment earlier in the film that a lot of people comment on where Joy says, maybe this is what happens when you grow up, you feel less joy. And a lot of people really like, oh, that hurts because it's true. And maybe it kind of is, but I think maybe it's that we have to be more deliberate about
Yeah.
finding those moments of joy and focusing on them.
Yeah. It's just different.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way. It's just different.
Mm-hmm. So, and then we see her going back out on the ice, but now she's not anxious. She's not trying to be the best player. She's just out there enjoying being out there and basking in that joy. And
Yeah.
I think in the forgiveness
Mm-hmm.
of her friends and also, giving herself grace.
That's living in the moment. That's living fully present.
Yes.
When we live fully present, then we can enjoy it. If we're too concerned about the future, then we can't enjoy it. It just drives bad behavior.
Mm.
And so that was another great metaphor of the power and health of living fully present in the moment.
Yes. Perfect picture of that. And then so at the end of the film, we see all of the emotions working together in harmony again. And even anxiety is included. And this is maybe why I argue that she's not the villain, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe she's just a reformed villain.
No, she has to be put in her place.
Yes, that's exactly it.
And so she's not kicked out, but she has to be put in her place. And she has this little comfy chair. It's a massage chair and everything, right? And drinking tea. I love all that. All that is just genius.
Yeah.
Right. And she even talks through the vibration of the of the massage chair. So awesome. And has her tea. And it's Joy that helps her sit down. It's like, okay, hold on a second. And so this character has to be put in their place.
Yeah.
And so another illustration I use with anxiety is that, if you have a bad tenant, you either kick them out or you make him behave, right? A bad resident, you kick him out or you make him behave. Hey, some people you can't kick out, but you have to make him behave. And so that's what anxiety is. Anxiety can be is a bad resident. And so if you could kick him out with traumatic anxiety, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I haven't been able to kick this thing out. So I got to make him behave, right? And keep him in its place, be aware of what it's doing. So yeah, I thought it was a good picture in that sense of like, no, okay, this is going to live with me. But if you can live with me, you're going to sit right there and you're going to chill.
Right.
So I loved it.
Yeah. And when she begins catastrophizing again about all the bad things that are possibly going to happen, Joy stops her and says, okay, none of that is happening right now, which is a great thing to tell ourselves.
Yep.
She says, we can't control whether Riley makes the team, which again is a good thing to ask yourself. Can I control this?
Mm-hmm.
Is my worrying going to add an inch to my height? No, as Jesus put it.
Yeah.
And then she says, but what can we control? And redirects anxiety towards something useful, which is, we need to study for the Spanish test.
Yep, absolutely. Just get in the moment, control what you can control.
So that's the end of the movie. And yeah, it's an amazing movie. So much to talk about, so much to think about, but just lots of interesting pictures of what goes on inside of our heads and how our brains work in a way that even children can understand, but adults can get a lot out of as well.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
These are all good considerations. All these things are a part of us. Some of us have a stronger character of anxiety with even more baggage, right? And we just have to understand that we all come at life differently. And so my baggage is heavier than others, but others may have more baggage than mine. But we can all manage it. We can. It just takes some intentionality. Embrace who we are in Christ, embrace the transformation He wants to bring about in our lives, and work on it intentionally and grow, heal, get better every single day.
Yes. As you often say, it's okay if you're not okay, but you don't have to stay there. And I would just add to close us out, Hebrews 4:15 says, "For we have not an high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin." So whatever you're going through, your high priest, Jesus, understands, even if it feels like no one else does. He experienced every human emotion. There's even a strong argument to be made that he experienced anxiety when he was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane before his arrest and crucifixion. So we're not ever alone. We have a Savior who can empathize with us, who knows us better than anyone, our good and our bad, and who still embraces and loves and cares for us. Which is why we can say with that very next verse in Hebrews, "Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need." All right, remind us again where we can find the Climb online. This is your ministry, and you also post about mental health topics.
Yeah, Facebook is the main place where I'll post resources, and you'd search the Climb Ministries. I do have a website, theclimbministries.com. And yeah, so those are the best ways to connect with me and see what's going on.
Okay, so we'll link to both of those in the show notes. Thank you again, Pastor Jay. This has been a really interesting discussion. I really enjoyed it, and hopefully the audience enjoyed it and got a lot out of it as well.
Yeah, hope so. Thanks, Tracy.
That's it for this episode of Tune My Heart. Thank you again to Pastor Jay for being my guest. Always a great conversation with him and such an important topic. If you'd like to make sure that you're notified about future episodes, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button in whatever podcast catcher you're listening in. And while you're at it, I would really appreciate it if you would give this podcast a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you would tell your friends about it if you think that they would benefit from it. Any little thing that you can do to help spread the word about Tune My Heart and help get it in front of other people is so appreciated. Please, if you are interested in reaching out for any reason, if you'd like to be a guest like Pastor Jay was, or if you have a question or a comment, I would love to hear from you. Thank you again for listening. Until next time, remember, it's okay if you're not okay, but you don't have to stay there.